my Google in Spanish, so sometimes it takes me a while because I'm like trying to learn Spanish.
Nice.
Okay, it's recording. All right, so Jeremy Chen here. If you're watching this, you probably already know me because I don't have a big audience or podcast, but I'm probably just sharing this with you personally. Like I'm saying, hey, watch this link. But if you somehow found this online too, that's great. I'll just share. I'm in North Philadelphia. We live in Kensington, and we're followers of Jesus, and we're trying to be intentional about how we think about what does it look like to relate to others across differences of race and class and money and all those things to embody the way that Jesus told us about many years ago. And I'm here with Malcolm, who lives in Texas, and you could say a couple things about yourself, and then let's start this conversation.
Yeah, so vocationally, I'm special advisor to Baylor's president for equity and campus engagement. So in the senior administration at Baylor University, and then I also co-pastor a church called Mosaic, also in Waco, Texas. And I've got a book coming out in February called The Anti-Greed Gospel: Why the Love of Money is the Root of Racism and How the Church Can Create a New Way Forward. So that's a little bit about me.
Okay, so that I think is one of the reasons that I want to chat with you and about this book, but also I'm curious how. So if you're writing a book like that, then you're probably talking and thinking a lot about greed all the time.
Yeah.
Both in like the ordinary everyday life decisions that you're making because you don't want to be a hypocrite, right?
Yep.
But also I'm imagining when it comes to this church community.
Yep.
Which, tell me a little bit about that church community. What's the makeup of it? How does it go over that you're talking about greed a lot? Is it like I'll just leave it at that. And
it's great. I mean, we planted this community 5 years ago. Initially planted it in the PCA, left the PCA in about a year and a half into the plan. In some ways because I was accused of preaching too politically, so to speak. Which for me was just applying the scriptures to every element of human life.
right.
But it stepped on some folks' toes. Not folks in the congregation, but folks who are in kind of the position of overseer.
And it's not to interrupt you. It's not to say that you wouldn't see that there are inappropriate ways to preach politically.
Of course.
Yeah. So.
Oh yeah. No. Well, and for me, as an example, after George Floyd was killed, I preached on Psalm 94. So it was one of the imprecatory psalms, essentially just saying that God cares about the oppressed and acts on their behalf, and that even though we may not be able to conceive of a just way forward, we serve a God of justice, a God who has promised to act on behalf of his people, and that then equips us to live the life that Christ has called us to live together. And the response, at least from the folks who were in oversight over us, were that all they heard in that sermon was anger. To which my response was, well, there are some things that make the Lord angry, and part of the work of sanctification is not just it's that sanctification is also an emotional work. Like we're to be angry at the things that make the Lord angry and take joy in the things that the Lord takes joy in. And the slaughter of the innocent is one of these things that makes the Lord upset, and it ought to make us upset too. It ought to drive us towards solidarity with our neighbors rather than towards accusation and judgment. But that and kind of I was very intentional about essentially naming in some ways some of the political idols of my own, of not only myself but of my own congregation and things like that. And these were things that people were not used to hearing. And the church as a community has really grown and been invigorated by that. So, for example, over the course of the last year, we started preaching through the Sermon on the Mount last November, and we will end at the end of this month. So it's been 11 months of us just going through the Sermon on the Mount, but the entire context of it has been, hey, it's my co-pastor and I have essentially told the congregation, hey, you're probably used to hearing the Sermon on the Mount as just this it's setting these lofty standards that you can never actually live up to, and so all this does is just remind you of your sin, and so then you just go on with your life, right, because these things are impossible. No, like this is actually the way that Christ is actually calling us to operate on a day-by-day basis. So let's do
Christianity 101
as a community. Exactly.
Not 401.
Exactly. And understand that Christ has actually given us the resources to be able to live in this way. He's given us one another. He's given us the sacraments. He's given us the Holy Spirit. Like anytime that you see these things that Christ commands us to do, and you say, well, I can't do that. What you're doing is you're in many ways denying the power of the Holy Spirit, and denying the profound resources that come from being embedded in a community of faith.
Can I jump into that really specifically? So, for example, one way in which, and this brings us more specifically about the money, right? The topic of the book and greed. One way that my friend Mako in Boston has shared about is like churches. For some reason we've come to this social norm where like you have your like small group Bible study, whatever space. Everybody talked about vulnerability, where you can share your feelings, share how are you doing, what's going on in your life. You share all this kind of stuff. You know, maybe like even like go share each other's spaces, cook for each other, whatever. But then once it starts to talk about sharing about money, anything to do with money, it's just like you can't talk about it. And we all get why, right? It's like one of those things, like politics, money, and whatever else. You know, and
sex, money, and politics.
And but if it's like you know, what if it was ordinary? What if it was ordinary? Talk about that. And what if it was a 101? Like just as common sense when you're going into that space where someone who is not from, you know, a faith background goes in and says, wow, look at the way they talk, like they share vulnerably, right? If it's so obvious to the people that are already inside in that group, what if it was so obvious, the idea of like learning to process how we're doing like finances and how we and I don't want to cog it, but one last thing I will say, I don't want to hug, but like Mako was sharing about in the Bible study that we've been going through, like it probably part of that is to do with the way money works now. It's just a number hiding in a bank account, so you can hide, but like imagine back in the biblical times when it's talking about Jubilee and all these things, really talking about, and like don't enslave people with debt. You're really talking to the rich guy, that like who would have the poor guy working for him on his farm, and everybody knows that you can't hide your financial situation from each other. You're solidarity. Like if this person's struggling to eat, it's because you are not providing enough for them to eat. Like it would be obvious. And where in contemporary life in America or whatever society, we are so hidden and separated from each other that we come into these church spaces or whatever artificial spaces. Now we're talking about the Bible, but we can hide our financial or, you know, social. That was a lot.
Part of well, and the reason why, I mean, one of the reasons why that's important is because, I mean, we're told in Acts 2 and Acts 4 that it's one of the markers of a spirit-filled community. So after the Spirit descends on folks, we're given essentially what are the four markers of a spirit-filled community. It's devotion to the apostles' teaching, prayer, the breaking of bread, and koinonia, the fellowship. Well, the fellowship is specifically like the sharing of goods. Like that's what it is. And then in Acts 4, we're told that God's grace was so powerfully at work among the people that there were no needy people in their midst, because because the body of Christ is supposed to be fundamentally understood as a community of sharing, and that's what I mean. That's essentially the primary antidote to greed and economic exploitation is building a community and economy of sharing. But that's actually one of the primary ways in which the body of Christ is supposed to be a witness to the world. Much of the Bible, this is Walter Brueggemann makes this point in his book Money and Possessions, where he just goes through the entire Bible and just the way that the Bible talks about money and possessions, and he's just like, a lot of the Bible is just about money and possessions. but 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 that's one of the things. But that's one of the things that he presses, that when we think about the witness that the people of God are supposed to be to the world, it is it's as much a spiritual and political witness as it is an economic witness. When we think about, a lot of people like to talk about the culture and the way that the culture shapes us and all these kinds of things. Well, one of the most important elements of human culture is its economics. And for us, our economic culture has shaped the way that we view, it shapes the way that we view one another. It shapes the way that we view the poor. It shapes the way that we view the rich. And in many ways, it separates us. In many ways, it separates us from one another. When what the gospel is calling us to do is to share with one another, which requires us to be in proximity.
Yeah. There's so much ways I could go down that path. I mean, feel free. Like I basically want anything that's coming. Like, you don't have to, whatever you wrote in the book, all of it. I'd love to hear it. But one, so if a question dovetails with that, please do. Something that you were saying makes me think. Right. So you're saying that the body of Christ, the church, is supposed to embody this alternative way of relating to each other, and economics, a way of exchanging, sharing.
Yep.
That is very hopeful. That is like, wow, the world looks at it.
Yep.
And is like, this is the way we want to be, right? This is the way like that. Now, when I feel like when a lot of Christians hear this kind of stuff, at least, even you're using the word fellowship is really talking about like solidarity of goods. I think people immediately going to be like, I hear you talking about communism, and communism led to tyranny, and it led to killing. So I'm processing that, because I think people are hearing it takes some to pull those things apart, right? So because that's talking about like enforcing,
and the state specifically,
the state version of it, and then what we're talking about is the body of Christ, those who like voluntarily commit one another in doing this. And then how would you differentiate those? But how would you also talk about Christians' relation to the state? Like, should we should we try to influence like US economics and all that to be more in a way that is less inequality or whatever, right? Like, so anyways.
Well, when it comes to the relationship with the state, my thing is like, sure, feel free to try, but also understand that the logic of the kingdoms of the world and the logic of the kingdom of God are two different things. So the best example of this is Romans 12 and Romans 13. So in Romans 12, what Paul, one of the things that I think Paul does in Romans 12 is he essentially lays out like it's in many ways the ethic of the Sermon on the Mount. He's basically a community of Christ is a community of love, of patience, of material sharing. All the stuff that he talks about when he talks about hospitality and stuff, he's talking about material sharing. And but then he also has this point about revenge, where he says, do not ever take revenge, but leave room for God's wrath. For vengeance is mine, I'll repay, says the Lord. And then and he'll talk about humility and all this kind of stuff. But then he'll say, and I believe he's quoting either a psalm or a proverb at this point, but he says, if your enemy is hungry, you give him food. If your enemy's thirsty, you give him something to drink. This is just basic love of enemy stuff that lies at the root of what the Christian ethic is. And then he moves to talking about the state, which operates by, I mean, in operating by the sword, we're talking about operating by the logic of violence. And this is something that he has essentially, that he's essentially forbidden of the Christian. So you're already, so basically when you read those things together, you notice like he's talking about the Christian here, and he's talking about this other thing in Romans 13. And what a lot of, and this has happened just with a lot of Christian thought post the 4th century, people have just tried to mix those two things together. And it's hard when the scriptures separate the two because they operate by different, they operate with different foundations. So now insofar like if we have any kind of power and influence in this system, it's meant to be, God only gives us resources for the benefit, essentially for the benefit of the needy. I think that's like, I think that's just generally true. If he gives me power and influence, it's to be exercised on behalf of those who need it. And so insofar as we have those opportunities, yes, use them to battle inequality and to battle injustice and things like that. But understand that what you're up against, is significant. And what you're up against is not, and this is the other point, what you're up against is not people. I also go with Paul in saying that we're not wrestling against flesh and blood. We're wrestling against principalities and powers and spiritual forces in the heavenly places and stuff. But one of the things that I especially want Christians to understand is that, like, God has set a space for you to actually be comprehensively obedient to his word. And that's what the church is supposed to be. Like the people of God we're always supposed to be a people who live first and foremost in obedience to God in a way that then witnesses to the world what that looks like, and then is an invitation to the world. And so when I talk about kind of political and like civic engagement and stuff, this is not to say that we retreat. It's not to say that we retreat from the world, because that you can't be a witness if you're away from folks. But you and you have to be present in order to be distinct. And so but that distinction is really I think really important. So whenever we have opportunities to call out, name, and resist injustice and inequality, we have the responsibility to do so. But I think we also have to understand that we will likely not be super successful in that fight broadly, because economic exploitation and political domination are really attractive for folks. And we are now in a broader economy that has essentially baptized the desire to get rich.
Yeah.
We are all told it's possible for you to get rich. And this is and here are all of the opportunities that you can do that. You can commodify every minute of your time. Just live stream it. Somebody will watch it, and then advertisers will pay. Like every bit of our lives and of our bodies can be commodified, bought and sold, and priced. And that's for some, for if your desire is to get rich, then we're in essentially a golden age. But for those of us who recognize that Paul specifically tells us that those who desire to get rich, this is in 1 Timothy 6, those who desire to get rich fall into temptation and a snare and have been kept out of the kingdom. Like that, it's not just it's riches, yes, but even the desire, even that desire to get rich is something that's deeply dangerous. And that is not a message that we often hear. We are often bombarded with all the, I mean, I just think about like all the random shorts that show up on Instagram or YouTube or whatever about how I can make more money and where my investment should be such that I can get rich as quickly as possible. Like that's just normal.
Yeah. 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 It's not even seen as it's not even seen as it's yeah, it's not even seen as greedy. It's seen as just,
Oh,
yeah, this is the
it's just
way.
it's just smart. It's just being smart with your money.
Right. Right. So, okay, but okay, so if the world around us feels like a dog eat dog,
Yeah.
everybody's out to build their platform and get more followers and get more, like, monetize this and that,
Yeah.
and you don't play that game, but you're not even playing a game. You're just trying to just honestly love your neighbor, share, not live at a pace of life that you're constantly hustling.
Yeah.
Just notice the needs of that. Like, in that system, there's always going to be the people left behind, and then you're noticing those people, and you're trying to.
Yeah.
I can see people worry that, like, if I try to go upstream against that, I'm going to be crushed. I'm going to be completely. I'm going to be completely. Like, that's your head is in the clouds if you can even imagine that's a practical life. Like, it's not possible to live that way. Like,
Who do
so
you
how,
think? Who
yeah,
do they think? Who do they think? Who do you think they think they're going to be crushed by?
um, the whole system. Like, I mean, it's too much to push back against that system, right? But everybody else, like, everybody is trying to run this race, and if I don't
Sure.
enter into that race, I'll just be crushed. I don't know. I think that's
Yeah.
the, yeah. But I'm
Well,
curious.
I think so. This is why I whenever I bring in this language, I think it's important to talk about what it means. So this is that particular stream of thinking is explicitly the way that neoliberal capitalism wants us to think about our lives. So when I refer to neoliberal capitalism, what I'm talking about is not just a particular economy. What I'm talking about is also a cultural project. And as a cultural project, it's one of the things that it comes down to is an understanding of what human beings are. And in many ways, it's an argument that fundamentally human beings are competitive. And so when we one of the things that we've also deeply imbibed is that I need to compete, that I need to regularly compete. And that's an incredibly tiring way to live. And it's one of the reasons why we can't put a finger on just the kind of constant anxiety that we live under. And part of it is because our economy functions in the background and tells us, look, you need to there's a certain level of ambition that you need to have. There's a certain and in order for you to maintain that, everyone around you is competing with you
Right.
for scarce resources.
And if you're
And
not on my level of this level of hype, and you're lazy.
yeah, you're
Anything
behind.
anything beyond that is like you're a bum that's lazy and trying to
Yeah.
on the system, right?
Yeah, you're behind. And part of it is because and it's interesting in the Lord's Prayer that we are to pray that the Lord would give us our daily bread. And also in chapter 6 at the end of Matthew 6, when he talks about worry and anxiety, it's about money. Like, it's about, like, what you're going to eat and what you're going to wear and stuff like that. And Jesus' response is, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. In some contexts now, like, people have twisted that into saying, well, look, if you seek God, then then he'll add all these riches and stuff to you. That's not what he's promising. He's promising you that your needs will be met. It's not promising because you don't need those other things. The kingdom of God and his righteousness is a profound, like, is a treasure that's more valuable than any kind of other possessions. The Lord is going to make sure that your needs are met. But your eyes are not to be on that. Your eyes are not to be on, well, somebody over here is doing better than me or making more than me or whatever. The only question that you need to be asking is, okay, Lord, are my needs being met, and am I able to meet the needs of my brothers and of my brothers and sisters and neighbors? Because anything that this is from Basil Caesarea and John Chrysostom, two theologians of the early church, have been really important for me in recalibrating this for me. But and Chrysostom says this, that God only gives us excess in order for us to meet the needs of others. Like that's the only reason that God gives it to us. And so but we're constantly told that we have more so that we can make even more.
Right.
And then there's no and this is me. I'll add this other comment. Like there's no upper limit. Like I think when we think about even just in kind of our day-to-day working lives, very few of us have asked the question, like, how much would I allow myself to make if just the trajectory just kind of kept going up? None of us would like, why would you? Because, and then the thought comes in, well, like, why would I stop?
Right.
Which is essentially which is why we all struggle with lifestyle inflation, that when we end up making more, we just end up spending more. And we just end up, as our capacity increases, the way that we talk about what we need also increases.
Right.
It's not true, but we just like to tell ourselves that we need everything that we have. And so contentment just kind of lies further and further in the distance because it's been choked by our greed.
And it's being and our minds are being manipulated to never, like the marketing and everything is in that culture is trying to continue to prevent us from being content, because you can't make money off of content people, right?
No.
You can't sell things to content
Everything
people.
would stagnate. The economy would stagnate if I was content with everything that I had.
Well, you mentioned the economy, so here's an idea that I never understood. Right, I never understood.
Yeah.
When people would say like to me, I guess I grew up. My parents Asian American, like Asian, like it's values of like just. And I actually think this is good. Like, just it's sort of a basic, obvious. Like when you start budgeting with someone, it's like if you have money, you know, let's try to save as much money so we can be generous. Like, and if you don't spend more money than So it didn't make sense to me when people start talking the economy. How is the economy? And they're saying like, all right, we have to like boost the economy by like. I think there was like certain tax cuts. I don't remember when this was. And then let's get tax people start spending. And I never really understood, like, okay, so you're giving, like, right now people are like, so if you give them extra money, they're gonna you're feeding an impulse to like, oh, I've got money now, I can spend it. And you're saying that's good for, if the economy is like how, when you aggregate everybody's spending money in the United States, how we're doing financially, we're feeding greedy sort of like a in and out. Once money comes in, I spend it impulse. You say that, however you're measuring like how well our economy is doing, you're saying that that's healthy. Like if I my daughter, that's like me just feeding her like sugar candy. You know, like that, and like saying, "Oh, she's eating. That's good. She's eating." Does that make sense? Like that really always confused me, and I was like, why does this discipline of economics operate this way? It's not intuitive. Seems something off about it.
Even the language. I mean, even the language that we use about the economy. Well, I mean. I was joking with a friend that a friend was joking that every time you hear references to quote unquote the economy, just replace it with Lord Mammon. So anytime And for those who don't know, in Matthew 6 is also everything. All of this is basically in Matthew 6. But Jesus says, Jesus says you can't serve two masters. You'll either hate one and love the other, or be loyal to one and despise the other. You can't serve both God and he uses the Aramaic word mammon, which is translated money or riches. Can't serve God and money. And when we talk about the economy broadly, or just look at, for example, unemployment, just kind of numbers wise, we are also not paying attention to the fact that, like, to what widespread poverty in the United States actually looks like. Because people will just say things like the economy is strong, and then you just kind of go on with your life because this thing has been said about the general economy. When one of the things that's also been going on is a widening gap between the rich and the poor. There are two wonderful books. There will be two wonderful books about particularly poverty in America, and one is Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond, which is brilliant. And then the other is $2 a day, living on almost nothing in America, where these sociologists, it's a sociologist and a social work professor, but they track these families that essentially on average on a monthly basis are making $2 a day per person. And what that kind of, and the fact that there are millions of children in those kinds of circumstances. And you can say the economy is strong all you want, but as long as there are people in those kinds of circumstances, I just morally we can't take comfort in this claim that the economy is strong.
Well, on that note, right? I mean, I've observed, I'm actually not reading the news or any of that for some months until the end of the year, partly because I knew the election was coming up. But so I haven't been paying attention. But before I stopped, I saw this stuff about the economy is doing well. But it's at the same time that I'm all these friends here in North Philadelphia, where we live, are like constantly asking us, "Hey, do you know any place for rent? Like my place is going up. Like we know so many people that are struggling with rent." To me, it was increasing. So something is off if supposedly in general America, the broader economy is doing well, but among the poor, they're doing worse. And so that to me somehow it's exploitation, right? These certain people, they're the ones that we think how they're doing matters, and they're doing really well apparently, and these people are doing it because it doesn't. These people are doing worse, and these people are doing better. Then it's got to be that they're doing really well, because it's got to balance out, right? When you average it out, that they're not doing well, or like how they're doing doesn't matter. So that really, you not trust the whole system, that this bigger system, or like however things are measured, right?
The latter part of what you said, that in this calculation there are some people who are deemed not to matter, is the important piece. People note this when they're like, unemployment statistics don't include the incarcerated and stuff like that. Like there are, and this is also the primary function of what race does. It puts people in categories so that they can be either ignored or exploited. And so, but it's important. It's important to note that when we hear those things, we have to ask we always have to ask the question of who matters in this declaration. As Christians, the poor and the needy always matter. As a matter of fact, in many ways, they matter the most.
I put my finger on. So you brought up the word race, and that's a whole can of words, but I think it's really important. I feel I've learned a lot from both Jonathan Tran and you about this topic again, I'm gonna throw out that word, and it doesn't have to mean anything to us, but like we talk about racism, but we don't actually talk about how it's connected to capitalism. And again, I know
Right.
some people, when they hear that, they'll immediately think, "Oh, so are you on to communism?" And I don't think that's what we're trying to say. But I want to see if you could help us understand this conversation about racial capitalism. Like, let me say it this way: how, like, the mainstream perspective, if you're the person, if you're a kind of person that talks about race,
Yep.
instead of being like, well, let's just not think about race, like it's all just like let's be colorblind. If you're not that,
Yeah.
if you talk about race in America, we assume you're a mainstream progressive person that just
Yeah.
sort of like yeah, like we saw it all on TV. We all, I mean, on social media, the mainstream way of thinking about like Black Lives Matter.
Yep.
And how would you differentiate or think that like the emphasis that you think is really important that we're missing?
Yeah.
What everybody already knows about what people talk about race. Yeah.
So first, I'll say one of the most compelling things that Martin Luther King Jr. emphasized, especially in the last 2 years of his life, was the idea of the triple evils of racism, militarism, and materialism. And one of the things that he also emphasized was that you cannot deal with one of those without dealing with all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Those three would also go by the names of white supremacy, exploitative capitalism, and war. And he would repeat the same thing, that you can't deal with one without dealing with all three. And what he's also doing there is he's also making a historical point. And so this is also what I do in the book, and something that the Black radical tradition does, is that historically, when we look at the creation of race, here's how it goes. And in the book, I frame it as what I call a demonic cycle of self-interest. This pulls from pulls from Martin Luther King, pulls from some others. So it begins with human beings essentially dominating and exploiting one another. So basically, I want power or I want money. That's going to require me to use another person in a particular way. But the other thing about human beings is that human beings don't like being dominated and exploited. People don't like being taken advantage of. And so the second part of this cycle is really important, and that's violence. It's enforcement of that domination and exploitation. But then there's another step, because the other thing is that we don't wake up in the morning and get really excited, unless we're psychopaths. We don't wake up in the morning and just get really excited about, oh, I'm really excited to dominate, exploit, and kill my neighbor today. So one of the things that we do is we create narratives in order to tell ourselves that's not what's actually going on. And the history of, in the book I lay this out with the history of lynching, but we all know it's obvious in the history of slavery, because we think about the fact that when the Portuguese came to Africa and witnessed chattel slavery, they didn't get involved because they thought, oh, these people are black, let's enslave them. It was, we have markets that we want to expand and we want cheap labor to do it. Chattel slavery is a great option. But then they have to justify that to both themselves and to the Pope, because technically they're not supposed to do that. And so you create these narratives of civilization and savagery. These people are savages, and we're trying to civilize them. They're heathen that we need to Christianize. They're black. This is where the categories of blackness and whiteness come from. That their blackness is a sign of their heathenness and savagery. And so we subject them to slavery for their own good. Yes, it also happens to be a significant good for us, because we end up making a whole bunch of money. But what's most important is that we're doing it for their good. But that cycle is the way that it goes. It begins with essentially greed. That greed needs to be enforced by violence, because people don't like I said, people don't like being dominated and exploited. And that greed and that violence need to be hidden by particular narratives, hidden and justified. It's this weird mix where race both justifies this state of affairs and it hides what's actually going on, too. And so when I ask, when I have classes and stuff, and I ask folks, like, what's so bad about race and racism, people have a lot of answers. But my answer is that it does three things: it lies, it steals, and it kills. And so the goal is the goal is essentially to drain it of its power, because it's fundamentally a lie, but it's a lie for a particular purpose. It's a
Right.
lie that's meant to prop up it's a lie that's meant to prop up this cycle of violence and economic exploitation.
Super helpful.
In a nutshell.
So no,
In a
no, that's
nutshell.
so we usually think of racism as just like, oh, you look at that, you don't like that color. You have like these
Mhm.
little biases that people like. For me against Asian American, oh, you look at me and immediately like, oh, what country are you from? Or like those little microaggressions. That's the way people talk about these days, and it doesn't touch the violence and the what were you saying, the domination and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
now, okay, so that's the history of how it came
Yeah.
about. But how does neglecting to think about this triangle, the way these things are connected together now, how does that make it so that we're dealing with racism, or in an inadequate or wrong way, or even in a way,
Mhm.
if I might even say, that actually can perpetuate the harm
Yeah.
um, today?
Yeah.
Like,
And part of it is drawing it in relationship with, because people think that race is about hate and ignorance. And so people think that the solution is, well, and I argue in the book the solution is love, but not love considered in just kind of in the sense of how I feel about somebody. Um, if the issue were ignorance, then the solution would be education. But the fact of the matter is that hate and ignorance are downstream of these other evils. So we have these kinds of feelings and biases, but don't actually understand where they come from. They come from a very long history of treating particular people in particular ways. And so what's most important, really, in many ways, what's most important is not the way that I think about you, but the way that I actually materially treat you. And this goes back to what is, I think, a scriptural definition of love. So in 1 John 3:16, we are told this is how we know what love is, that Jesus Christ laid down his life for us. Therefore, we ought to lay down our lives for one another. And then John immediately says, if any one of you has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need and does not have pity on them, how can you say that the love of God is in you?
mhm.
James will say something similar when he talks about faith and works. What are the works that he specifically talks about? It's like if your neighbor doesn't have clothes and daily food, and you just say, "Go be warm and well fed," what does that what does that do?
Right.
Love is material investment in one's neighbor. And so
Mhm.
when we think about race specifically, a lot of our conversations about race don't get to the level of materiality. And people think it's just about the way that I think about people, like the friendship, who I hang out with, and all this kind of stuff. No.
I've got a
Race is a
black friend, I've
fundamentally
got an Asian friend, I've got a white friend,
exactly
I've got a, you know,
right. Yeah.
right.
Look. No. Race has never historically been about feeling. It's always been about materiality. It's always been about, there are particular people that you keep in these specific political or economic situations, and that's the role that race plays. It's, you're this kind of person, you belong over here in this kind of neighborhood with these kinds of resources, that kind of stuff. That's what its purpose has been. And so when we think about how to resist it, I mean, this is what the book is about, but that churches, because Christ has called us to be this way, he's called us to be communities of deep economic solidarity, creative anti-violence, and prophetic truth-telling. Because what I want us to do is, I want us to deal with race not at the surface level, but to go for the eyes of the demon rather than its extremities.
Right.
Um, if we deal with, I refer to race and racism as children of mammon. Like it's greed that gives birth to this category. And so we got to deal with the child, yes, but we also got to deal with the mother. And so and
if you don't deal with the mother, you kill one of her children, she just gives birth to another.
He just has other kids. Like
no, but can I focus in on this, because like,
of course.
Now, so like everybody is afraid of being racist now.
Oh yeah.
That's the worst thing you could possibly be.
Oh yeah.
Everybody. But what I noticed,
which is the civil rights, like this is I think one of the negative effects of the civil rights movement.
Wow. Yeah.
Is that it stigmatizes this idea of racism, and it does so, and one of the sad things about it practically was that, I mean, King and A. Philip Randolph and Bayard Rustin and others like understood that you can't have racial justice without economic justice.
Right.
But the progress that they saw was focusing on race as opposed to economics. And so they essentially decided, well, we're going to go where we're finding successes.
Right.
And so that meant kind of doubling down on essentially racial identity language and stuff. And which then put a lot of people on the defensive, to the extent now that we're like, well, nobody ever wants to be known of or called a racist.
Right.
But then that keeps people from asking the deeper questions of, well, like, what does that mean? What does that mean materially? Like, right. It just means, okay, well, I'm not going to say particular things, or I don't want to be known as thinking these particular things.
Let me drill on this, because something I've observed, right?
Yeah.
Post George Floyd, I observed that the people that were the most like, all right, I'm going to go down a book club and I'm going to learn everything I can about every culture. I'm going to learn about Asian history, like, because it's like, I don't want to be shown as ignorant, right? So I don't want to do it a microaggression. So I'm not going to learn about, I'm going to learn about East Asian history. I'm going to learn about Black history. I'm going to learn about, and I think it's good to try to learn.
It's good. Those are good things. Try to be educated.
Something that was obvious to me, that's like, wait, so we're saying only the people that have the time, the energy, even intelligence, because not everybody's capable of that. The privilege to learn all of that are the ones that can educate away their racism. And those who, and I observed also, so you're a poor white person that lives in my community, say here, not a lot of Black, because they've, a lot of them, they're the ones that have been left behind. But you functionally have been in solidarity with your Black and brown neighbors. Right. But maybe don't understand all of these whatever stuff. Sure. And, maybe even will say things that other people may see as, like, from educated circles, may see as racist. Like, you just don't know that much. So, like, you'll maybe come up to me and be like, hey, like, I'm saying myself now, hey, tell me about your race background. Like, in other circle conversations, in educated conversations, that educated white person will know, don't do that to that person because they're Asian, whatever. They're going to be racist, even though they're simply curious, like, which Asian is he? But that poor white neighbor asked me that. Genuine curiosity, just doesn't know that you're not supposed to do that. And their life has actually been, so I had to me, I would start noticing these things. I'm like, that person is not, like, in other certain conversations, people would be like, that person's racist. And I'll be like, but really? I mean, I really, like, I think they're genuinely, like, I get it. If I know them well enough, over time I'd be like, hey, for other Asians, like, I don't mind, because, but sure, like, probably a better way is to be like, wait till you get to know them, be like, oh, by the way, what's your cultural background? Like, find a more subtle way to do it, right? And coaching them about the microaggressions. But I observed that post George Floyd, all this race conversation, it was so, like, in this way that made people anxious to prove racist. But then I watched, like, you've got these, it's so easy for these corporations that I know don't give a, at all about how North Philly, for me, North Philly is just a shortcut for, like, where North, like, the everybody talks about redlining, but nobody talks about the actual redlined Black and brown people. Right. Their actual so you now you as a white person know about redlining. Okay, wow, how
great.
Okay, great. And now you still work for that.
You put that as a feather in your anti-racist cap.
Right, but you still work for that giant corporation that is taking advantage of and harming, like that doesn't care about, and that corporation has a DEI group that talks about Black Lives Matter. Great.
Of course.
Okay, so you see my frustration, and then and wanting to be able to bring up this conversation, but not knowing how, right? Because talking about greed starts to feel a little bit like or just the way we think about money. I guess it's so it just feels like personal.
It absolutely is.
Versus talking about racism feels like everybody kind of gets that we should
exactly right. We're all on the same page that racism's bad.
Right.
We don't necessarily I mean, now we don't necessarily understand why it's bad, but we all know, especially post 1960s, like we all know that it's a bad thing. Like we're all culturally same page. It's bad. I don't want to be associated with it.
Yes.
But that is the extent to which we have collectively reasoned about it.
Right.
And my thing is also like those conversations can also just get more and more complex to the extent that you just have a bunch of scholars arguing about it forever. Like that's what's going on. It's what's going on right now. And so one of the things, at least for me, is actually it's actually much more basic than we think that it is. Race is one of these categories that we've created in order to dominate and exploit each other. And so if that's the role that race plays, if that's what and Jonathan talks about this too, if that's what race does, we spend all this time kind of arguing over what race is, but we as communities need to focus on what it is that race does.
Yes.
And what it does is it actively separates us from one another. It weakens it weakens our communities, weakens the kinds of conversations that we can have and stuff like that. But also, like, it kills people and it steals from communities and it lies to people about themselves and about their neighbors. And so at least one of the roles that we have, particularly as the body of Christ, is to be communities that resist lies, that resist theft, and that resist murder. And like this, just at a basic level, it's and that's why I mean, especially those relationships of solidarity are really important to continue to build. But there's other stuff in there too. And like I said, this is what, especially the second half of the book, that's what this is all about.
We really have to talk again after the book comes out and read it.
Oh yeah,
I'll have so many questions, but I guess I'm asking the question in my mind, right? So like, if this stuff about the money, like, or class or whatever, like became so obvious to me because of where I live, right? And the people I'm connected to. But then part of me was thinking like, but why aren't people talking about it? And I wonder if part of it is this, like, if you're the one that's struggling underneath that oppression, like for you to bring it up, you can detect that you just, oh man, if I talk about it's the rich people or it's the way powerful money, like it, and poor person, it makes me sound like I'm just resentfully like I'm you know, maybe I'm struggling in life, maybe I'm, you know, I'm a single mom, and then it's like, okay, it's easier to blame myself.
Yes.
And to be like, because if I do bring something up about it, it's just people will look at me, look down on me. They'll look down on me, and they'll be like, "Oh, you're just resentful or whatever. That you're not, you didn't succeed in the world." And so for that person, they don't want to bring it up. But for the person that has money, I'm thinking about the person, like those of us who follow Jesus, right? That should be having this kind of the person who has money to bring this kind of stuff up. It's uncomfortable because it would probably require, and I'm putting myself in this category, right?
I'm gonna have to give some of it up.
Yeah, it requires something of me that's really uncomfortable. And me and our people from our class, it's really uncomfortable to like question whether our way of relating to people. It's way too overwhelming to ask that of ourselves, right?
I think it's one of these spaces where we have to understand that the call to discipleship is a difficult call. Like we have to well, and this is the other thing. Like we also have to actually read the scriptures. So we have to see in the scriptures this like constant inveighing against the rich, specifically because of their exploitation of the poor. We have to hear Jesus when Jesus says after the rich young ruler leaves, and he says, it's harder for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God. And the people who are listening to him understand that he's saying, I mean, it's impossible for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. And they're like, wait a minute. If rich people can't do it, because that's literally what he just said, then how is it possible for any of us? To which he says, with man it's impossible, but with God it is possible. But even just this base understanding that that wealth is more dangerous than it is like neutral or good. Mm-hmm. That already is going to blow people's minds when that's explicitly what the scriptures say about it. Right. Yeah. Our first response is no. Like I've got all this stuff to be, it just gives me more of an opportunity to be more of a blessing. It's like most of the time, the way that's actually going to work out in your life is that it just gives you more opportunities to hoard and more opportunities to sin. Yeah. And so like, but the way that the fact that we incorporate our money and our possessions into our very identity, like that's the other issue. The fact that the first question that we ask anybody whenever we meet them is what they do for a living, yes, already indicates that the assumptions of our economy have dug that far deep into our minds that we actually think that the most important thing about somebody when we meet them is what they do. My first question is not that. My first question is generally when I meet somebody is what is it that brings you joy? Because wow, that already gets, well, first of all, when people are reticent to get into a conversation, like you just ask them about what it is that they enjoy. That'll animate them. But it also is my subtle way of undermining the ways in which I know that the economy would tell me, well, what's really important for me to know about this person is where they work and how they feel about where they work and stuff like that.
That's actually something that I intuitively picked up. So my background, I went to Princeton University for college, yeah, and then I was doing campus ministry there for several years, and then God kind of radically shifted my direction to come, about an hour away from there to Philadelphia in Philadelphia. But when I made that shift, immediately I noticed nobody asked me about where I went to school, and nobody asked me about what I did for a living. And I immediately started picking up these kind of things about things to not do. And now I can name part of that is because that whole system is caught up. And I know I'm going to use that big word again, but neoliberal capitalism is caught up in this. And it takes a lot. The reason I feel like it's important to continue to name the system is it takes a lot to discern the workings of this invisible system, right?
Yep.
What it is and how it works. But I believe that was caught up in it. So it shaped our just what we thought was normal.
Yeah.
And it wasn't malicious in us. We generally were caring about people. When we see someone just like, oh yeah, what do you do? Oh, great. But something obvious when it came to North Philadelphia, and I was realizing, underemployment, the way, like your job isn't going to be part of your identity, even if you do have a job. Not going to have the same relation to your identity, partly because, maybe you're doing a job that, it's not like it's helping me survive financially,
Yep.
It's not even something that you're like wanting to do for the rest of your life. It's not something that you gain a ton of pride in. And, in other conversations, it would be like, if that's brought up, in that neoliberal place, people like, oh wow, that's great. You're doing you're a janitor. Oh wow, cool. Tell me about that.
Yeah.
Inwardly, you would feel really awkward about it.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we're trained to be like, oh yes, you should feel a lot of pride in what you do.
Right.
That's the way you find derived joy because and contentment in life, or is your productivity in this world. And I'm not, again, obviously from a Christian perspective, there's a good thing like participating in building this world up, and
Absolutely.
and work is a good thing, but just the way it became such a dominant part of how you view people and how I view myself is over exaggerated. And anyways, I'm ranting, but you see what I'm saying? Like, that was a big part of my journey in unlearning that, and I'm still unlearning that. But yeah,
man.
No, it's I don't know. I feel like this is therapy, right?
I'm a pastor. I'm a pastor in everything that I do. So that's what it
is. You know, and it is therapy to like vent about the oppression that living under the claws of mammon, right? In some ways, living in the way that neoliberal capitalism sort of shapes our psyches, our ways of thinking about what's normal. It's living in the oppressive system of mammon, and coming out from it and learn to follow Jesus. The freedom of it is therapy, right? It does feel life-giving. I mean, I want to share, like, so my wife and I, we're working, right? Just today, we've closed on a house.
Yeah.
Part of that, we're working with a young adult who's been my mentee for a while, and difficult housing situations, family things, but we were thinking about helping her with rent, for a while. But then my wife looked into a house down the street from us, and it was like the mortgage was going to be the same amount. It's like, why help on rent that just gets thrown away to the when you can do a mortgage, and it becomes. So then, like, I think we've had this value, or that's an idea. We've had this idea that look like real solidarity with each other across. And I think God opened this up for us to start talking about this kind of stuff. And I mean, we went for it. And today is the day closing on that. I just came back from signing the deals, and now we're going to be turning towards having this house, like a rent to own, zero interest rent to own situation.
That's awesome.
So what does it look like to live in community and like be talking about finances and budgeting and all these things together? Yeah. And I think that previously the idea would have been very scary and very like, it's like a pie in the sky deal. And even though I believed it, but in actually practicing it, I am seeing it's very freeing. It's not it doesn't feel like I'm like cutting, like if money is a part of your identity, it doesn't feel like I'm a part of myself to like purchase this house, that the whole idea will be that they can help them own it, and so anyways, it's just to add to your point about like money and our sort of economic ability to produce becoming such a part of our identity. I'm definitely feeling that a lot, like that moving away from that mentality is a really freeing,
There is a hold on, let me pull up this text real quick. What you bring up is indicative of Mark 10:29-31, where Jesus says, assuredly I say to you, there's no one who has left house or brothers or sisters or father or mother or wife or children or lands for my sake and the gospel's, who shall not receive 100-fold now in this time houses and brothers and sisters and mothers and children and lands with persecutions, and in the age to come eternal life. Everything that I think one of the things that Jesus is also saying there is, particularly in particularly in church communities, when you sacrifice for one another, what you gain when you sacrifice your own stuff, what you gain are the resources of the community as a whole. And that is much, much more than what you just have individually. But you only gain access to that when you actually build those relationships of solidarity, such that when you it's like why in 2 Corinthians 8, why Paul encourages the Corinthians to give to the Macedonians. He's like, my goal is not that that you suffer and they thrive, but that you fill them from your excess and they fill you from their excess, because the goal is equality. Then that means that down the line, if you were to find yourself in crisis, you have a community of people who also knows that you've been willing to sacrifice for them, and you get this web of self-sacrificial relationships that ends up with everybody getting their needs met. Like that's what the goal is, not just a bunch of people going through crises alone and not being able to do anything about it. It's people recognizing that it's often that often the people that the Lord has placed us in relationship with, like God's miraculous solution to our problems is often the people that He's bound with us by the power of the Spirit. But most people cut off from themselves opportunities to be recipients of that love and purveyors of that love, because we're encouraged to build lives of essentially just deep self-sufficiency, as opposed to healthy interdependence. This is the other element of the neoliberal thing, is that we're encouraged to be just deeply, insofar as we're encouraged to be deeply individual and isolated people, where everything that happens in our lives is our fault. So if I lose my job, like I did something wrong, as opposed to decisions being made by the people above me that just kind of swept me away. No, like I did something wrong, and now it's going to be on me to get my life back together. Like all of that focus also kind of wears away at us, which is one of the reasons why it's important for our communities to not, for our identities to not just be individual identities, but communal identities. That I'm part of a family. I'm part of a family of people who is going to buoy me up when I fall, and that there is a good beyond just my good. Like there is a good that we have in common. Yeah. These are all things that we have to be very explicit about, because what the world is going to continue to tell us is that no, like what matters is what you do for you and yours, and that's all that matters, because nobody's gonna come in for you when you're in crisis or whatever. And to which we respond like, no, actually there are people whom God has actually called and brought together specifically to walk alongside me in the midst of this stuff.
Again, if you haven't experienced this, I guess as we've been moving in this direction, it's a deeper form of community with some of us.
Yeah,
it's really life-giving. I could see people listening to this and then being like, the kind of relationships that you're talking about for the church to actually be sounds like a cult, and it sounds like too good to be true, or like one of those like communes, like communes, and a little uncomfortable, right? Like I don't know if I want to in that way, not in that way. Though that's one comment. Yeah. The other comment that I thought about was like you were talking about like the church in Macedonia or whatever, them taking care of each other. And I was thinking about like, so does how big insurance hold on how economics works in the United States? Is that an indictment on the body of Christ globally for how we've failed to love one another, so that we have to rely on insurance to cover our butts when we're in emergencies, right? I mean,
there's so much money in it, and it's entirely a fear-based industry.
I don't want. I'm sure. I know. Some of my friends, I'm sure, work in insurance. I'm not trying to say like,
sure. I got insurance on all kinds of whatever.
But it is making me think, right? It is making me think. Like, I don't know. Why is it that we are so? Why is it that we imagine that in an emergency that I will be alone, or nobody will come step in to help? That nobody that I just have to have this entity I paid into help me,
And that it's embarrassing, and that it would be embarrassing for me to ask my community when I'm in that kind of crisis. That's the other thing. Like, I mean, for me in my congregation, I mean, the first thing is me just constantly encouraging people to ask, because I'm like, this is why. I mean, and this is a way for churches to even think about their finances. Like that, your finances are entirely meant for the edification of the body of Christ. That's what it's for.
Yeah.
That's why people are not giving to the institution. They're giving to one another. And so the more that you can then indicate to your congregation that this is like, you are actually giving to one another, as opposed to just people thinking that they're just giving to just some fund. That's another thing that actually inspires people to continue to give to one another, because they can see, oh, look, this person has gotten housing because of our giving to the church. This person's medical debt has been wiped out because like all those kinds of things are things that we can do collectively. We can actually take bites out of these major things that people are in many ways drowning under. I and two other folks may not be able to solve this issue, but when we get these communities together, we can do some really significant stuff.
Yeah.
And it's why the gospel is such a thing that, and what the Holy Spirit does is he brings together people from all kinds of different backgrounds, specifically because like it's a wonderful picture. It's a wonderful picture of solidarity when you see people grow closer to one another, as opposed to, and this is another thing that I say in the book, that generally when we think about kind of giving and philanthropy, it allows the giver to remain in this superior position of giver, and then the receiver stays down here, and then they just both kind of go on with their lives. But that's not the way that God gave his son. God gave his son in such a way that brought Christ and us together for the purpose of bringing us up. And so when we think about even the ways that we give to one another, we are giving to one another, understanding that there may be things that I have that you need, but there are things that you have that I need too,
Right.
which means that we need to get closer to each other. Not, I'm just going to give to you and then move on with my life. Like there are ways that we need to get closer to one another, so I can continue to grow, because I need you in order for that to happen.
So, and then this even transforms, even thinking about, like, say, I know I've been there, and I know people have been there, when it's like, oh, if I give money to this person,
Mm-hmm.
and are they going to be responsible in the same way I would?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It transforms, when you're doing a community, it transforms that kind of conversation, because if you're actually caring for each other, then if you realize that if it really 100% was that, right? You are just really hardworking and sacrificial, and you gave all the money into this pot, and this pot is being used for me now. And do I really want to, like, I don't know, just spend on like some gambling habit? Pot, because not only is it just feeding a habit that's not great for me, but like I'm actually now harming my brother.
Yeah.
So it starts to feel like the real.
And you're in relationships of accountability, where people where like, because people love you, like this is the other thing. Like I was talking to a group yesterday about this. It's like, what if I give to somebody and then just they're lazy or whatever? And my thing is like, we default to judgment. So we default to not being generous with people because we think they're gonna be lazy, which is one of the ways that our economy tells us. That's what it tells us. People are in need because they're lazy. The scriptures, I think, encourage us to default to mercy. And yes, that is going to open you up to the risk of being taken advantage of. There's not a promise that you're never going to be taken advantage of. But if we're going to if we're gonna calculate risk, the risk of me taking advantage of is a risk that I ought to be more willing to take than the risk of allowing my brother, sister, or neighbor to die of hunger or thirst, or being out on the street. Like that. If I'm gonna weigh risk, one of those things is more risky than the other.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's man. This is really good. I mean, I think that we could probably have another 3-hour conversation. But let me just because we're. I mean, let me let you end it. Let me let you end it by maybe. All right, I'll ask you to say. Okay, so
Yeah.
if you could pinpoint, right? I mean, I'm sure you already have pinpoint a lot, but if you could pinpoint something that followers of Jesus, when it comes to money or any of these
Yeah.
topics that we talk about, really need to that's really not understood well, that really need to address that we haven't already talked about. Even be in your book, yeah. But I'm sure you probably put the most important things in your book. But
Yeah, I mean, and I think I tried to hit all of it over the course of our talk. But I think the main thing, I mean, really, I think the main thing is that love is material. And so
not just
yes.
right, not just like, oh, I care about how you,
Yeah, not just vibes.
not just asking how the person's doing, but like making sure they are doing well, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and like, because to go back to the first John 3:16 thing, like when we say Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, therefore we ought to lay down our lives for one another, like that is saying that what Jesus did for us is literally the most material thing that you could do for another human being. Because not only did he take on flesh, but he died. This is just like we're talking about the full range of materiality Christ experienced as an act of love for us. And so in a world that I think kind of encourages us to get farther and farther away from each other. I think one of the things that the gospel encourages us to do is actually to get closer to each other, like constantly.
Yeah.
Because like it's one of I mean I'll add this to one of the I'll say this is one of the four great Christian mysteries, because the first one is the Trinity. The second is the hypostatic union, how you can have full humanity and full divinity in one person. The third is the mystical union of Christ and believers. But another one of these great mysteries is I think the mystical union of believers with one another. And that's something, but that's something that we should actually be able to see. Like that is the essentially the visual representation of a people who actually believe these other three mysteries. And so like that is it's a tall order, but this is why when Christ ascended, he sent his Holy Spirit.
Right. The power that raised Christ Jesus from the dead, resurrection
Precisely.
power, is what is the glue that's connecting us together. If anything, unless we are getting in the way of that glue sticks things together, right? And so that resurrection power should be sticking us together in genuine sincerity.
Yes, sir. And that these kinds of things are actually more spectacular examples of resurrection power than like, yeah, I'm about to preach on in the end of Matthew 7 when he says that not everybody who says Lord, Lord will enter into the kingdom. And they'll be like, well, didn't we prophesy in your name and drive out demons and all this kind of stuff? And Jesus will be like, I didn't know you. These kinds of acts of solidarity are more spectacular examples of resurrection power than me preaching a wonderful sermon or driving out a demon or whatever.
Yeah.
Like that's the kind of imagination that we need the people of God to have.
It's hard to believe because when you watch
right?
movies and you see a demon being driven out by the little cross,
It's like,
thing,
that's really cool.
that's so cool.
Jesus is real. Well,
right. Another way of saying it is this is the harder demon to drive out. And
yeah, for sure.
Driving Mammon out is a whole lot more difficult than driving out the other demons or whatever. Let's say it that way, right?
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. This has been fun. I mean, obviously we're very much on this similar page, at least in ideas of what we want to like our hopes. Now, when it comes to actually practicing this, it's like we need the mercy of God and the constant
and the creativity of the people of God. Like, this is not, I don't claim to have all the answers as to specifically how that's going to look in every particular community. But I do know that these are things that we ought to be thinking about and figuring out how to do together.
Yeah. This is the way forward.
Yeah.
Well, I hope this isn't the last time we get to brainstorm a little bit more about this stuff. I think,
yeah, man.
I feel like this is the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this broader area of topics, and it's going to be only just beginning to kind of wrestle with how deep this goes. But
yeah, man.
So thanks so much.
Of course, brother.
I need to figure out how to stop the recording. Oh, detener la grabación. There it is.